Wilmer McLean holds a unique place in history. He once said the Civil War started and ended on his property, and he wasn't wrong.
McLean's elderly neighbor, Judith Henry, saw the first major battle on her property, too, and McLean's daughter lost her prized possession, known from the last day of the war on by the strange name Silent Witness.
Let's dig into this.
Wilmer McLean was a farmer and a grocer, and he had been a member of the Virginia militia. In 1853, he married a rich widow named Virginia Mason, and they bought a large plantation called Yorkshire on a creek called Bull Run in Manassas, Virginia. They had several children, and life was good. Until 1861, that is. The Civil War battle lines were being drawn, and Wilmer McLean was about to be in the middle of it.
Both the North and the South wanted control of a strategically important railroad junction at Manassas. Confederate General of the Potomac Beauregard arrived in Manassas in 1861 and took over Wilmer McLean's house as his headquarters. Barn and outbuildings were used as hospital, prison, and storage facilities.
The first battle of Bull Run, called the Battle of Manassas by the Confederates, began in July. It was the first major battle of the Civil War, and McLean's Yorkshire plantation was hit by Union artillery. A cannonball fell through the fireplace, interrupting the general's dinner. At least he got dinner. Another cannonball flew through the detached kitchen building where soldiers' dinner was being prepared. One soldier wrote later in his memoirs that their meal was ruined and they had no dinner that day.
At the nearby Spring Hill farm in Henry Hill, McLean's neighbor, Miss Judith Carter Henry, an 85-year-old widow, was not in good health and confined to her bed. As Union soldiers came closer and closer, her son and daughter tried to move her to a house nearby for safety. The smoke and sounds of cannon and gunfire were just too much for Miss Henry, and in the middle of the chaos, she demanded they take her back to her home. Unfortunately, Confederate sharpshooters were using the house for cover by then.
When Union troops fired on the sharpshooters, artillery crashed through Mrs. Henry's bedroom wall. Mrs. Henry was killed. Some reports say one of her feet was torn off and she had anywhere from 1 to 13 wounds. Her children survived, although her daughter was deaf for a time from the sounds of gunfire amplified in the chimney of the fireplace where she hid. Mrs. Judith Carter Henry was buried next to her house, the first civilian casualty of the Civil War.
Wilmer McLean would work supplying Confederate troops until the spring of 1863. By then, he wanted to get his family away from the war and moved about 100 miles away to a little town called Appomattox Courthouse. He thought they would be safe there.
Even at their new home, they would see soldiers walking through the town headed south, and as time went on, the men were often wounded and wearing ragged clothing. By April of 1865, Confederate General Robert E. Lee was trapped near the town by Union forces. Knowing his cause was doomed, he agreed to meet with Union General Ulysses S. Grant to discuss terms for surrender.
Lee's military secretary chose Wilmer McLean's Appomattox home as the site of the meeting. Some reports say McLean offered the house, while others say he was reluctant to become involved. Either way, General Robert E. Lee surrendered to Ulysses S. Grant in Wilmer McLean's home, and McLean supposedly said, "The war started in my front yard and ended in my front parlor."
Everyone knew history was made that day, and everyone wanted a piece of it. Mrs. McLean would later say soldiers carried everything off, including her children's toys. Wilmer McLean tried to stop the men, but some just shoved money at him as they left. Reportedly, the table on which the documents were signed was taken by Major General Edward Ord after he gave McLean $40. Major General Philip Sheridan took the table Grant used to write the document and shoved $20 in gold into McLean's hands.
The strangest item they took was little Lula McLean's doll. She had been left in the parlor, and young officers apparently fought their boredom that fateful day by throwing the doll back and forth like a ball. They called her Silent Witness, some saying that they wished they had seen everything in the parlor that she had, and the name stuck. One of the men was President Abraham Lincoln's oldest son, Captain Robert Todd Lincoln.
Captain Thomas W.C. Moore ended up with the doll, and his family kept her in remarkable condition for 120 years before she was finally returned to her home at Appomattox in 1992. You can see her on display to this day.
After the war, Wilmer McLean could no longer afford the house and moved the family back to Manassas before moving on to Alexandria, Virginia. He later worked for the Internal Revenue Service there and died in 1882 at the age of 68.
His Appomattox home was dismantled for display in 1893, but it ended up in storage until the National Park Service rebuilt it at its original site in the 1940s. It is part of the Appomattox Courthouse National Historical Park.
And the Yorkshire house at Manassas is long gone, with only a marker, now in a CVS parking lot, noting the spot where McLean saw the war begin.
Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed this video. Hey, here's another DragonDen video you might like.
And if you like this video, don't forget to hit that thumbs up button.
And you can hit the notification bell if you'd like to know when our videos come out.
Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next one.